This is everything that happened at Trump's inauguration. Before it even started, both pro and anti-Trump demonstrations kicked off in Washington, with one side even bringing a guillotine. All the guests started to arrive, which included the likes of Shou Chu, Joe Rogan, Tim Cook, Jeffrey Bezos, Obama, without Michelle, the Paul brothers, Conor McGregor, Senator John Fetterman, who casually turns up in a hoodie and gym shorts in the middle of winter, and of course, Zuck, who got caught in 8K, 120 FPS. They said bro was looking at Silicon Valley. Oh, and while the inauguration in the United States was beginning, so too was the one in Nigeria. While waiting for the event to begin, Elon was either, rebooting or sending out a tweet with his Neuralink. This was Melania's POV for the entire day. And when it was time for everyone to take their seats, Theo Von's collapsed. After which he said, JD Vance was sworn in as the vice president with his right hand up and his left hand on the Bible. And then when it was Donald Trump's turn, he only put his right hand up. So he either forgot or just didn't put his left hand on the Bible as is customary. And after, once it became official, Trump then gives his speech where he says a number of things like the golden age of America begins right now, that as of today, the official policy of the United States government is that there's only two genders, that America will plant their flag on Mars, that they will drill baby drill, take back the Panama Canal, push for a colorblind merit-based society, and rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Once the inauguration after party began, we got Mike Tyson on Jake Paul's shoulders, Elon Musk sending the internet into a frenzy after doing this, we got Trump dancing with a sword, Trump and Elon moving their body to music, oh, and hyper-realistic footage of what Baron Trump looked like all day. Trump then went on to sign a huge number of executive orders, which I will go through in a part 2 in a couple of hours.
This 10-year-old beat a 90-year-old to death because she yelled at him. On October 11th of 2014, 10-year-old Tristan Carilla visited his grandfather Anthony Verbitsky in his home in Tyler Hill, Pennsylvania. Tyler planned to spend the day with his grandfather while his mother was at work. His grandfather Anthony was not the only one living in that home. He also took care of a 90-year-old woman named Helen Novick. Just after 10 a.m., Tristan had entered Helen's room without permission to ask her a question, and because of that, she scolded him. Tristan was not happy with this, so he grabbed a wooden cane and held it against her neck for several minutes, then punched her in the throat 5 times and as well as the stomach. This caused swelling and hemorrhaging to her throat, which caused her to die. At around 10:30 a.m., Tristan told his grandfather that he could see blood coming out of Helen's mouth. Anthony checked on Helen, but he couldn't find any blood. She just seemed scared and her breathing was labored. Anthony asked if she was okay and if she wanted to go to the hospital, but she said that she was fine and she didn't need to go to the hospital. Tristan denied hurting Helen, but his grandfather told him to stay in the other room away from her. Around 11 a.m., Anthony went to go check on Helen, but she was unresponsive. Tristan ended up admitting to him that he had punched her and placed the cane around her neck, so he called 911 to report her death and she was transported to the county morgue. At 3:20 p.m., Tristan's mother, Martha, had walked into the police station to tell them that her son had unalived Helen. She and Tristan spoke to a state trooper and she told him that her son had ADHD and ODD and had violent behavioral problems. Tristan had admitted to that state trooper that he did unalive Helen, but he didn't mean to, he just wanted to hurt her. On October 13th, Helen's autopsy results came back and revealed that her cause of death was blunt force trauma and the manner of death was homicide. The very next day, police charged Tristan as an adult with murder. The case was later transferred to a juvenile court and he has to stay in a juvenile facility until his 21st birthday.
Worst ways people have died. In 2008, 17-year-old Asia LaShawn Ferguson was riding the Batman ride at the Six Flags amusement park when his hat flew off his head. After getting off the ride, he scaled 2 fences and entered a restricted area in an attempt to retrieve his hat. As he reached his hat, the Batman ride came barreling towards him at 50 miles per hour and ended up decapitating him instantly. Next, in 2013, 22-year-old Kyle Lee Stocking and his 5 friends saw a rope swing stunt on YouTube and wanted to recreate it. Everything was fine, but there was one fatal thing that they didn't check properly. The length of the rope was longer than the drop down, so when Kyle jumped, he plummeted straight into the ground, killing him instantly.
Hell in Different Religions, Part 2. Buddhism. In Buddhism, after you die, you can be reborn into one of the 6 realms of reincarnation. Which realm you'll be put into depends on your actions in your previous life. The lowest realm possible is the realm of Naraka, which is hell. Now, there are different Narakas you can be put into, it just depends on how bad you were in your previous life. each of these Narakas having vastly different punishments. And the climates in the different Narakas can range from incredibly cold to boiling hot. But the time spent in Naraka is never eternal. Once you've served your punishment, you'll be reborn once again. But the time one does spend in Naraka can be hundreds of millions of years, or well beyond that.
This man served 17 years in prison after being mistaken for someone that looked just like him. In 1999, Richard Jones was falsely accused and imprisoned for a robbery that happened at a Walmart in Kansas. A robber tried to snatch a purse from a woman in a parking lot, but this man was not Richard. It was a man who looked just like him and had a similar name as Richard. The person that they should have been looking for was this man named Ricky Amos. But unfortunately, an eyewitness at the Walmart identified Richard as a culprit and testified against him in court. Even though Richard had an alibi at the time of the crime, it wasn't enough evidence and he was put behind bars for a 19-year sentence. Richard tried to appeal, but nothing ever came out of it. Now, 16 years later, in 2015, other inmates began telling Richard that there was another inmate who looked just like him. Richard had a gut feeling, so he contacted his attorney, and when they put Richard and Ricky side by side, it was clear that they were identical and they might have made a mistake. 17 years later, Richard was finally released from prison when the witnesses said that they can barely tell the difference between the two men. After his release, Richard received a $1 million settlement by the state.
Urban legends that ended up being real, part 28.
The Dark Watchers. They are most commonly spotted in California. They are near the steep cliffs of Big Sur. They are described as shadowy figures that watch from a distance. One encounter comes from a lady named Clara Jenkins. She was a hiker who ventured into the hills alone in the early 2000s. She was determined to find the perfect spot to watch the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. She had hiked this trail many times before and thought little of the stories, but this time something was different. As she climbed a narrow path to reach the peak, she saw a tall, dark figure standing motionless ahead of her. She called out, but the figure didn't respond. The moment she tried to step toward the figure, a rush of wind blew through the trees and the figure was gone. Another story comes from 1982 when a local rancher named Thomas Holloway was working late into the evening repairing a fence near the base of a ridge when he noticed something strange in the distance. Standing on the crest of the hill was a figure tall and unmoving, staring down at him. Holloway, having grown up in the area, was no stranger to the folklore, but this was the first time he had seen the Watchers up close. That night, Holloway's dog disappeared without a trace. The next morning, he found strange markings around his property, deep scratches in the earth as if something had dragged itself across the ground.
These paintings are much more disturbing than they appear. This painting shows George Bush throwing a paper airplane at two Jenga towers that are knocked over. It clearly represents Bush's involvement in 9/11. But what's even scarier is that exact painting was found in Jeffrey Epstein's living room, who used to be friends with Bush. These are a series of paintings created by artist Louis Wayne back in the 1900s. They capture his slow descent into increasingly worse
Here are 3 real ways to survive encountering your doppelganger. According to ancient mythology, doppelgangers are malicious entities that look and act exactly like us and seek to replace us in our own lives. The first thing you'll want to do to avoid having a run-in with your evil twin is to destroy or get rid of all of the mirrors in your possession. One of the most common tricks that a doppelganger will use to try and infiltrate a person's home is to impersonate their reflection, since they are capable of entering the mirror world. Unfortunately, you can't get rid of all of your reflective surfaces, but you don't have to make it easy for them. If you really need a mirror, buy one that's too small to crawl through. Secondly, if possible, you're going to want to try and build a very close relationship with the people around you, especially your family, as they are the people who are exposed to you the most. That way, when your doppelganger does find you, they'll be able to tell the difference and hopefully give you some forewarning. And above all, if you suspect that your doppelganger has located you, you're going to need to pay very close attention to your surroundings. Don't write off any details, no matter how small they may seem. If something feels off or out of place, they may already be inside. Comment if you think that you could outsmart your doppelganger, and follow for more.
She must have been out of her head. Oh, here it is.
You won't believe this.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 22. In the 18th century, you could bring your cat or dog to the London Zoo and actually pay your admission by feeding it to the lions. Bus seats are specifically designed so you can't tell how dirty they really are. When an octopus reproduces, it removes its penis and throws it at the female so she can impregnate herself, and then he grows back another one. Oysters are actually alive when they're served. They don't die until you eat them. In Australia, there's a plant called the gimbi, which has such a severe sting that when horses brush up against it, they actually throw themselves off a cliff because they would rather die than experience the pain. Live chat support agents can see what you type before they send it so they can reply quicker. Spider rain, yes, you heard me right, is a real and naturally occurring phenomenon.
A nurse put this dying baby beside her twin sister to say goodbye, but it's what happens after that will make you cry. Twin sisters Kyrie and Brielle Jackson were born in Massachusetts in 1995. They were born 2 months early, so they were struggling to breathe and stay alive. So they were put in separate incubators to make sure they would stay alive. As the days passed, Kyrie's condition got better while Brielle's got worse. She was turning blue and was just barely alive. Brielle was dying and the nurse was doing everything she could to help her, but it wasn't working. A few days later, the nurse decided it was finally time to let go. So she put Brielle beside Kyrie to say one last goodbye. But as she felt the presence of her twin sister, something amazing happened. The nurse couldn't believe it. Brielle began to breathe normally again and made a full recovery. This is Kyrie and Brielle today, happy and healthy.
This is why you need to be careful with dating apps. On November 15th, 2017, 24-year-old Sydney Louv decided to meet Bailey Boswell in person after speaking on Tinder for a few days. For their first date, Bailey invited Sydney to come over to her apartment that she shared with her boyfriend Aubrey Trail. 24 minutes after Sydney arrived to the apartment, her phone was turned off and Bailey and her boyfriend Aubrey murdered her and chopped her body into 13 pieces using a saw. This attack was planned by the couple for a while, and there's even surveillance footage of them going into Home Depot and buying the saw and cleaning supplies. They then scattered Sydney's remains along the roads in Clay County, Nebraska, and it was found 3 weeks later. Investigators later found out that the couple talked about gaining power by committing murders and making videos of them torturing people. At the end of it, Bailey was sentenced to life in prison and Aubrey was sentenced to death.
Proof we are not alone, part 2. These are fossils recently discovered in Egypt, and what they show is terrifying. You can see when the fossils are placed together, they completely dwarf this human. What you're seeing is an ancient Egyptian demon of chaos called Apep.
Hello, my friend. What you're actually showing are whale fossils. Discovered in a place in Egypt called Wadi al-Than, meaning Valley of Whales. Millions of years ago, this place was underwater. And so there's a huge concentration of whale fossils as well as the fossils of other creatures like sharks and turtles. Fossils in this location started being discovered about 120 years ago. But yeah, not quite an ancient Egyptian demon of chaos.
Don't watch this at night, you've been warned. This is the story of a video game called Sad Satan. This game is thought to have originated on the dark web. In the original game, supposedly found on the dark web, you walk down a hallway while horrifying images are shown to you. These images allegedly include things like CP, mutilated corpses, and other snuff content. And apparently even playing the original version of the game would destroy your computer because of all the viruses that it had attached to it. Now, nobody has found the original version of the game, and people aren't even sure it exists. But there is a quote clean version of the game that you can actually go and watch gameplay for.
This mom with a giant belly thinks she's having twins, but then the doctors make a shocking discovery. Mike and Hannah were trying to have kids for so long, and after years of failing, her pregnancy test finally showed positive. Her belly was growing really fast, and after the first ultrasound, it turns out she was having twins. The couple was really happy all throughout the pregnancy until she was about to give birth. But a couple weeks before the babies were due, her belly really started hurting and her water broke. She was immediately rushed to the hospital where doctors made a shocking discovery. Before I tell you, do you want to get paid to literally just walk? Well, I found this app that pays you for every step you take. And today, I've already made 100 sweat coins. Press the link in my bio if you want to get paid too. When the doctors performed the C-section, it turns out she wasn't carrying twins, but she was actually carrying quadruplets. Mike and Hannah were so happy to be parents to 4 beautiful babies.
These are just some of the major changes for America that Trump made official yesterday. He signed an executive order reinstating the death penalty for any illegal migrant who commits a capital crime and anyone convicted of murdering a law enforcement officer. He declared a national border emergency, halting all illegal entry immediately, which also paves the way for US troops to be sent to the southern border. He delayed the TikTok ban by 75 days. He ordered 2 name changes, the Gulf of America and Alaska's Mount Denali to Mount McKinley. He officially signed DOGE into existence, which is the new department led by Elon to cut government spending. He signed a mandate where all federal workers must work in the office, saying that over half of the 2 million federal employees either work regularly from home or are fully remote. He pardoned about 1,500 defendants charged in the January 6 attack on the US Capitol. He signed an order to restore freedom of speech in America and end government censorship. He reversed 78 Biden administration regulations, including pausing foreign aid, reversing the acceptance of gender identity, now only recognizing 2 genders, and the other is to do with the pandemic, and I can't even say it on here, otherwise the video will get censored. Go to my YouTube for that. He is removing America from the World Health Organization in 12 months, saying that they are ripping off the country and the United States will stop all financial contributions to their work. He withdrew America from the Paris Climate Agreement for the 2nd time, calling it an unfair, one-sided ripoff. I mean, that was just part of a much broader effort to roll back climate policy, because he also declared a national energy state of emergency, promising to fill up oil reserves and drill baby drill, and also cut off climate-related funding, which was approved under the Biden administration. And all of that was day one. So the question is, does this excite or scare you?
For hundreds of years, people in California have reported seeing these tall, dark figures standing on tops of mountains watching over people. These cloaked figures are called Dark Watchers. Most people see these figures and notice how tall they actually are. These guys mainly show up in the afternoon. Like it says in their name, these guys mainly just watch over people from a distance. These guys have been here for hundreds of years. Even the Spanish reported seeing them in the 1700s. The Spanish had a name for them. They called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros. When you translate that to English, they're called the Dark Watchers. So you might be asking, what do these guys even do? Well, like it says in the name, they mainly just watch. They don't attack hikers, they just stand there. People say that they are bad omens, and I don't know if I agree with that. While they're harmless, it's still kinda creepy knowing that these guys are just watching over you. What's even weirder is that if you try to go near it, they just completely vanish.
So it looks like I might have been wrong about the Puniverse all along. When it was first initially announced, I thought the Puniverse had to do with all of these characters fighting one equal being or just unaliving people in general. I didn't know they were going to be fighting each other in some gauntlet-style horror movie. This photo was released yesterday with the caption, "Place your bets," with Winnie the Pooh looking at Peter Pan. Of course from Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, and Peter Pan from Peter Pan Neverland Nightmare, with the title, Puniverse, Monsters Assemble. Now look, I could be completely looking at this wrong, but it looks like these two are either A, going to be teaming up, or B, they're going to be scrapping. Their universes may be colliding. So on one hand, you have all of the characters from Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, Tigger, Piglet, Owl, and of course Winnie the Pooh, versus everybody over in Peter Pan Neverland Nightmares universe, which if you haven't seen the movie, you have Tinkerbell, Peter Pan of course, and Captain Hook. For some reason those odds don't make sense. We also have to take into account other characters that are going to be releasing later this year, with Bambi the Reckoning. Bambi's going to be in on that too. And finally Pinocchio Unstrung. Now we also got this list that was recently released. Some other movies that are going to be coming out. Maybe not this year, but in the universe itself. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 3, Awakening Sleeping Beauty, Alice in the Mad Hatter, and Snow White Returns. All from this picture, it looks like they're going to be fighting. Who are you putting your money on?
And sit with her daughter for hours, comforting her in her grave.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A man in Venezuela was woken up in the dead of night to a strange haunting whistle. At first, he thought it was his mind playing tricks, but then he heard it again. Dragging footsteps echoed through the silence, creeping towards his room. But as whoever's outside arrives at the door, this happens. Something tries to get inside. The man believes he was visited by El Silbón, a wandering spirit of death from Venezuelan folklore, known to enter homes with open doors. The further it sounds, the closer he is.
What happened to Jelani Day? 25-year-old Jelani Day was a grad student at the Illinois State University. On August 24th of 2021, Jelani was seen on campus security footage, leaving abruptly after being on the phone. The car that Jelani would drive was a white Chrysler 300, and it was found 2 days later near a wooded area near the Illinois Valley YMCA, and it was about an hour north of the university. Inside of the car, they found the clothes that he was wearing, and immediately this raised suspicions of foul play. Just 9 days later, after his car was located, Jelani's body surfaced in the Illinois River. The coroner ruled his death as drowning, as there were no signs of injury or intoxication. However, Jelani's mother states that her son was an avid swimmer who would not have drowned himself. A second independent autopsy was done, and it revealed that Jelani's body parts and organs were missing, and some were described as mush and liquefied. About 6 weeks after Jelani's body was found in the river, a man who pulled over on I-55 noticed his shattered iPhone on the road. Police records show that Jelani's phone was turned off around 9:21 p.m. after he was seen at a local dispensary. His car was then captured on video driving away before the phone was tossed out onto I-55. Police claim they recovered 23 chat conversations, 17 messages, and 6 numbers of interest. Despite all of this information, authorities claim that there is no evidence stating that someone was with Jelani when he went missing or at the scene where he was found. As of right now, this case remains unsolved. Someone out there knows something, and for the sake of Jelani, I truly hope he gets the justice that he deserves.
Now that we're fully back, who is the most terrifying character in the Puniverse as of right now? All of the characters from Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you the picture of Tigger, but you of course have Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, the Owl, and Tigger. Now, everybody thought Piglet was unalived in the second movie, coming to find out he is not and can regenerate. Kind of like Winnie the Pooh, because we all thought, and Christopher Robin thought, bro was done for. Of course, at the end of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Coming to find out that he is still alive, and so is Piglet. But I'm gonna be honest, Owl has acid breath, and of course can fly because he's an owl, and Tigger is just devious. We also have the characters from the newest release of Peter Pan Neverland Nightmare, being Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, and of course Captain Hook. Now I'm gonna be honest, the scariest one out of all of them is probably Captain Hook. We didn't see much of him in the movie, but when we did, bro was catching bodies. I guess you can also factor in Peter Pan because of the fact that he thinks he's doing something good by sending those kids to Neverland. And then you have the two characters who still don't have movies yet but are gonna be releasing later this year, being Bambi from Bambi and the Reckoning, and Pinocchio from Pinocchio Unstrung. I'm gonna be honest, out of this whole entire list, who do I fear the most? I'm gonna go with Tigger. If you've seen Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, you know bro was devious. Things he was saying, it was giving Art the Clown. But a close second is probably Peter Pan, because he can just justify whatever he's doing in his own head and make him think that he's right. Like and follow for more, because we're back.